Hey guys, welcome back to the Cody Leach podcast. It's Wednesday again, so time for another top 5 rundown. So, being that Suicide Squad's coming out this week, I figured it might be cool to do a top 5 DC comic movies. Now, there's a few of them on here that people probably aren't going to recognize as being DC comics, but they are, in fact, graphic novels that are published by DC. Now, before I start this list, I do want to notate that I am going to be omitting The Dark Knight from this list. I love The Dark Knight. I think it's a fucking brilliant movie, but I'm sick of hearing about it. I'm sick of talking about it. Every time I see a DC or comic book top 5, top 10, top 25 list, Dark Knight's always at the top. So I'm just going to omit it from this list for the sake of being able to talk about things that I don't always hear every time I turn around. So The Dark Knight will not be on this list. So starting off at number 5 is A History of Violence. Now this came out in 2005. And it was directed by David Cronenberg, and it stars Viggo Mortensen, Maria Bello, Ed Harris, and William Hurt. And it's based off of a 1997 graphic novel, which is written by John Wagner. And the basic story of the movie is, a mild-mannered man played by Viggo Mortensen in this small town becomes a local hero after he thwarts this robbery in his diner that he works at in a really violent manner. And, he starts getting put on the news as being a hero and put in the newspapers, and then after he starts kind of getting his name out there, these two mobsters show up in town and start stalking him and start telling him that they know who he is and then they know where he's from, and he may or may not have a past that he has hidden from his family. So it's a very, very cool movie, very fucking violent. I remember when it came out, it was one of those movies where you didn't realize how freaking bloody and gory it was going to be until it got there. But, William Hurt was in it for all of about maybe 8 minutes, 10 minutes at the most, and the guy was nominated for a Best Supporting Actor. So, that right there, first of all, it tells you how good of an actor William Hurt is, but it tells you how cool that movie is. If you can have 8 to 10 minutes of screen time and get a damn Oscar, he didn't win. But just the nomination for that is pretty crazy. And Josh Olson was also nominated for Best Writing for adapting the screenplay. But very awesome movie, very simple. Viggo Mortensen, probably one of his best movies. And Maria Bello is really, really good in that. And Ed Harris is always awesome. So definitely recommend checking that one out if you haven't seen it. It is on Blu-ray and DVD. I'm sure you can find it on all the Netflix and all the instant video apps that are out there, but check out A History of Violence. That is my number 5. Moving on to number 4, Man of Steel. Now, this is a movie that is really divisive, and while I can understand Batman v Superman, why a lot of people don't like it and why a lot of people do like it, I'm going to be seeing Suicide Squad here either tomorrow or the next day. And so far, this seems to be just as divisive, if not a little bit more divisive, than Batman v Superman. Man of Steel was a movie that I didn't understand all the negativity with it. Now, Superman is a comic book character, which I know he's arguably one of probably the top 3 most famous and most popular superheroes in comics ever. But I have never liked Superman. Even when I was a kid, I never liked Superman. I never liked the animated series. I never watched any of the old Christopher Reeve movies. Just Superman, to me, even when I was a kid, he had way too many powers, and it just kept him from being interesting. I was like, this guy can survive anything. He has a power like a goddamn utility belt. He has everything. It just never interested me until Man of Steel. Now, when Man of Steel was coming out, I was like, it could be okay. The last Superman movie that I saw was Superman Returns with Brandon Routh, and I fucking hated that movie. So, went into this with very low expectations, which is probably why I ended up liking it a lot more than some people. This was directed by Zack Snyder, came out in 2013, and it stars Henry Cavill as Superman, Michael Shannon as General Zod, Lawrence Fishburne, Amy Adams, Diane Lane, Russell Crowe, and Kevin Costner. And, it was your standard origin story reboot. Clark Kent learns that he's a superpowered alien from the planet Krypton, and, he assumes the role of mankind's protector as Superman, but he finds himself having to prevent General Zod from destroying humanity right when he's kind of coming into the realization that he can be Superman. And I loved everything about this movie. And, when I first watched it, I was like, maybe because I had low expectations, I liked it a lot more than I should have. And I've probably rewatched that movie 3 or 4 times since 2013, and it gets better every time I watch it. So for whatever reason, Man of Steel and what Zack Snyder did in that movie just works for me. That's the only Superman that I've really gravitated towards. It's the only one that I've ever really connected with and thought that he was a really cool character. I like the kind of vulnerability that he has. I thought Henry Cavill did really good in this first movie. I was, less impressed with what he did in Batman v Superman, but I liked what he brought to, kind of this quiet, unsure of himself alien who has to find his place in this world. And I thought everything about it was really good. I liked Michael Shannon as Zod. All the side characters were really good. Russell Crowe and Kevin Costner had a really good duality, being his two fathers, being Kal-El and Pa Kent. Just everything about Man of Steel, for whatever reason, works for me. This is one of those movies where I feel like everything was done right. Now, honestly, I'm not a big, like I said, superhero or Superman fanatic, so I'm sure there might be some inconsistencies as far as his comic book lore and his comic book, the rules of Superman that might not have transitioned into this. I know everybody had a problem with the way the movie ended with Superman and General Zod without going into spoilers. But to me, I like that. To me, that brought more of a realistic vulnerability to Superman, the way that story had to end. But, Man of Steel, if you haven't seen it yet, which I think the majority of us have, but if you haven't, especially if you're like me and you're not really a big Superman fan, give it a shot, because to me, Man of Steel was just a kick-ass origin story, a kick-ass Superman movie, and even though it seems like they're kind of dropping the ball as far as keeping their momentum, I thought it was an awesome start to this new DC Extended Universe. So check out Man of Steel as my number 4. Number 3 is Road to Perdition. Now, this is a movie that was directed by Sam Mendes in 2002. Stars Tom Hanks, Paul Newman, Jude Law, and Daniel Craig. Pretty awesome cast. And it's based off of a 1998 graphic novel written by Max Allan Collins. And this movie takes place in 1931 during the Great Depression, and it follows a mob enforcer played by Tom Hanks, who him and his son are seeking vengeance against a mobster who murdered the rest of their family. So it sounds like a very basic setup. But seeing Tom Hanks play this really brutal mob assassin pretty much, and Paul Newman is kind of being the mob boss. Jude Law has a really creepy role as this kind of like a hitman that the mob hires once in a while. And Daniel Craig is the son of Paul Newman. He was just kind of getting started out. This is a really, really cool comic booky mob movie. And, I say comic booky because there's certain elements of a graphic novel that you can pick out in there, but honestly, for the most part, if you didn't know that this was based off a graphic novel, you would swear it was just written to be a mob movie for the screen. It was really cool when it came out in 2002. It really surprised me. I was only 12 years old at the time, but still, just being Tom Hanks always does awesome, but you very rarely get to see him play somebody who's kind of, morally ambiguous. He's always pretty much the good guy. You don't really get to see him play a bad guy or somebody who's close to that very often. So, that alone was something different enough to make me really love Road to Perdition. But I just love the story that him and his son go on. And I like how his son kind of grows from being this, innocent kid that doesn't really realize what his dad is a part of in the beginning, and then, after their family's murder, they have to kind of go together as partners pretty much, and just the different things that they do, and the Tom Hanks teaching him how to drive and be a getaway driver, and teaching him how to shoot and all that kind of stuff. Just, I don't know, for whatever reason, it just really resonated with me, that father-son relationship in that time of peril. So Road to Perdition is an awesome mob movie. It's an awesome graphic novel adaptation, and that is my number 3. So if you have not seen it, check out Road to Perdition. Number 2. Zack Snyder is showing up for the second time on this list with 2009's Watchmen. Now, Watchmen completely came out of nowhere for me. I was not yet into comics like I am today, so I had never really heard of it before. The trailers looked interesting, but it looked very weird. Watchmen is very unique for a comic. It's half like a 70s, 80s retro, old school superhero story, but at the same time, it's like a satire of superhero stories. And this starred Jackie Earle Haley, Patrick Wilson, Jeffrey Dean Morgan, Malin Ackerman, and Billy Crudup. And it's based off of the 1986 and 1987 series by Alan Moore. And Alan Moore is also famous for, The Killing Joke for Batman. And the basic story is, it's like a dark satirical take on the superhero genre. The film is set in an alternate history in the year 1985 at the height of the Cold War between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. And as a group of mostly retired American superheroes investigates the murder of one of their own before uncovering an elaborate and deadly conspiracy while their moral limitations are challenged by the complex nature of their circumstances. So the characters alone in this is what drives this movie, because every single one of these superheroes, from Rorschach to Dr. Manhattan to, Night Owl 2 to the Comedian, Silk Spectre 2, Ozymandias, they're all so different. Rorschach is this really brooding, neo-noir, rebel, vigilante type. Dr. Manhattan's like a mix between Superman and like a blue god. And, Night Owl's kind of like your Batman. The Comedian is this, I love Jeffrey Dean Morgan. He's pretty much like the badass, take no shit, I'm going to do it my way and just blow a hole through the door and not ask any questions type superhero. And just all the different characters in this are really unique, and their relationships with each other is really interesting. And this goes in a lot of places that you really don't see too many superhero stories go. Zack Snyder, to me, this is his best movie aside from the Dawn of the Dead remake, which is his first movie. This is definitely his best comic book adaptation as far as I'm concerned. There's an Ultimate cut out there that has, I think, maybe 10 to 15 minutes of like animated mixed into it, which I haven't seen yet, but the director's cut that I've seen is like a 3-hour plus movie, and that movie just flies by for me. The music in it is fucking awesome. You got stuff from like Simon and Garfunkel and like just the wildest things that you would never expect to see in a superhero movie. And just the Rorschach is easily probably my favorite character because he's the most interesting. And that was really the first time that I've seen Jackie Earle Haley. But Jackie Earle Haley's performance in this is really cool. And even though he's this little short redheaded guy, when there's a scene where he's in a prison where he just totally owns everybody, and you believe that he could fuck you up. So he's great. Patrick Wilson is always awesome. Like I said, Jeffrey Dean Morgan's one of my favorite actors. I can't talk about that guy enough. Billy Crudup does really good as Dr. Manhattan. He's not required to do a whole lot. And Malin Ackerman does pretty good too. She's usually not somebody that you expect a whole lot from, but she did really well as Silk Spectre. So if you want something really, really unique for a superhero story, I can't think of anything more unique than Watchmen. So check out Watchmen. That's my number 2. All right, top of the list. So, being that I'm not putting The Dark Knight on this list, I'll go ahead and disclose, yes, I am putting a Batman movie on this list. So you might be thinking, if he's not putting The Dark Knight on there, what is he putting? Is he putting Batman Begins, Dark Knight Rises? Is he a closeted fan of the Joel Schumacher movies? Does he think that the 1989 Batman is the best? Nope, none of those. Batman, Mask of the Phantasm. A lot of people are probably shocked right now. Yes, the 1993 animated movie. It was directed by Eric Radomski and Bruce Timm. And it had the voices of Kevin Conroy, Mark Hamill, and Dana Delaney. And this was the only theatrical release, if I'm not mistaken, based off of the Batman animated series. Everything else was direct to VHS or direct to DVD. And this movie was the biggest Batman story and the best Batman story of my childhood. And to this day, whenever I see that movie on a VOD station, or if I happen to download it, or if I see a DVD sitting somewhere, this story to me to date is probably the best Batman story we've seen on screen. Short of The Dark Knight, but it's pretty fucking close to The Dark Knight, even for being an animated movie. The storyline of it is basically, it introduces this character, Andrea Beaumont, who is voiced by Dana Delaney. and she's Bruce Wayne's former girlfriend who returns to Gotham City trying to restart their romance. And 2 weeks prior to her return, this new mysterious vigilante begins kind of murdering Gotham's crime bosses. And due to the person's dark appearance, he's mistaken for Batman. So Batman is being framed or being mistaken as the culprit for all these murders. So now, on the run from the police, the Dark Knight has to apprehend the killer, clear his name, and deal with this new romance brewing between him and Andrea. And the directions that this movie takes, and this is one of the very few times, where somebody will give an origin story for the Joker, and I'm on board for it. Because, I've said in a previous video that I do not like Joker having an origin story. I like the Joker that you have no reason for his madness. There's no explanation for why he's doing what he's doing. There's no explanation for why he is so fucking insane. But the way that they do it in this movie, it ties together with the story. It makes sense. It drives forward the narrative. It gives a good kind of a parallel with Andrea Beaumont and everything that's going on with Batman. I fucking love Mask of the Phantasm. And I'm surprised that, even though Batman the Animated Series has done a lot for Batman lore, and it's, it was such a famous series that even, for those that don't know, Harley Quinn was created for that series. People think of Harley Quinn as being one of the most famous Batman villains, like she's always been around. She wasn't around until they wrote her for that cartoon. So it surprises me still to this day that the Phantasm hasn't been adapted for the screen somewhere, or hasn't made it into one of the Arkham games somewhere. Because to me, the Phantasm is one of the best Batman villains that nobody ever talks about. So, I think that this movie's on Amazon Instant Video. I don't think it's on Netflix, but it should be out there on DVD. So if you have kids, or if you are a Batman fanatic, or if you remember this movie from your childhood, definitely pick up Batman Mask of the Phantasm. I've shown it to Shane. Shane fucking loves this movie. And like I said, to date, this is a story that has yet to be rivaled on the screen. And this is a cartoon. So, Batman Mask of the Phantasm undoubtedly is my number one DC comic movie. Well, that about does it for my top 5 DC comic movies, guys. I'm going to be back here in a couple of days with my review on Suicide Squad. I'm not hearing a whole lot of good things about it, but you will see my and Holly's review for it, hopefully on Friday, maybe even on Thursday if we can get over there tomorrow night. But still got my fingers crossed that I'm going to see something that the critics haven't seen, and I'm going to enjoy it more than the majority. Maybe if I go in with lower expectations, I will enjoy it more, just kind of like I was saying with Man of Steel. But thank you, as always, for listening to the Cody Leach podcast. This has been another Top 5 Rundown. I will be back next Wednesday with another. Go ahead, and also I had talked in a previous episode about my buddy Abbott Skelding. Check out his podcast, the Creative Cohorts podcast. It is on SoundCloud and iTunes, and I'm going to be on an upcoming episode of that, I believe, this week, if not next week. So I have a link posted in one of my previous videos, but I'll post it again on this video, and he will be guesting on this show, the Top 5 show, either next week or the following week. We're going to be doing the Top 5 comedies, so look forward to doing that. That should be a lot of fun. But go ahead and like and subscribe below on SoundCloud or iTunes, and also on my YouTube channel. And leave any viewer questions that you have below in the comment section, or you can tag me on Twitter with the hashtag the Cody Leach Podcast, and I will answer your questions either in a Q&A video, Q&A podcast, or in the end of my Monday Movie News episodes. But this has been another Top 5 Rundown, and I will see you again.